episode 276 of the Broadcasters Podcast. This is King of Podcasts, checking in here from you, South Florida, USA, in the studios here of the King of Podcasts radio network. BroadcastersPodcast.com is where you find the show. We're going to talk about the Writers Guild, the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers. The strike is ongoing. We are now going into the fourth day as I record this program for you this weekend, and Hollywood is shut down, essentially. So the late night show, Saturday Night Live, and various other projects are now being shut down. We're hearing a lot of the things that you would normally hear in the strike sessions where these labor unions would come to a halt, and how these deals come into play. And it's a matter of, all right, what's going to happen here? Because now we're going to have a deal where the Writers Guild has already gone on strike. Negotiations with the Directors Guild is next. Then SAG-AFTRA, the actors and actresses. All that's coming into play. And then what happens next? What's the answer? At this point, the Writers Guild, they're justified in getting this time right now to take care of that. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. We've talked about the negotiations they've had previously when it came to the strike that almost happened the last time. And so we talked about this on the program before, going back to November of 2019. Actually, no, I went to April 2019 and the deal deadline coming up. And then it was the AMPTP. See, let me go through really quickly on this program what we've talked about. I think it's a quick history lesson that you should learn about here. So here's what we got. I'm going to go back a little bit. So the franchise agreement for the Writers Guild and Association of Talent Agencies, that all got thrown away. Like there was a big implosion out of all that where the talent agencies, it was all done. Right? And let me go back to February 2021. The Writers Guild have gone through a lot of things because they're really at a point of trying to hold on and keep themselves in a play. Right? Remember, there was so much that was going on here when it comes to the business of the Writers Guild being screwed over because of the change in production in Hollywood. The streaming services, now that you see now in 2019, 2020, especially with the pandemic, the Writers Guild and the traditional sense of television and networks and the digital disruption that has caused more people to cut cable and to watch less network TV, to the point we now have shows are hoping to break 7 million viewers for scripted programming. Now they're at the point where they're struggling right now. The writers are not getting, there's not that many available jobs to do 22 episodes a year. And if there is, they're on the cheap. There's no budget for these shows. And then these writers that are very qualified, they're working on streaming. But the streaming's in a harder sense because of the fact that you're getting series that are being done at 6, 10, or 13 episodes at a time. They're not doing the long series anymore. That's gone. And the streaming services are all doing it this way. And because of that, it's tough for all these writers to go ahead and be able to do multiple projects to be able to give themselves a year-round income. Plus, what kind of benefits are they getting at all, if any? And that's what they're hoping that the union's supposed to be providing them, right? They've had a lot of things in where we have been very influential. And it goes back to 2021 of February, because the Writers Guild was working on reshaping the talent agency business, the packaging. Remember when they had all these agencies that would go ahead and package the same director, producer, writers, the whole shebang, and one price, the franchising. And the Writers Guild said, stop it. They don't want the talent agencies to have this kind of control. And they started going ahead and changing everything, because they had all these agencies now signing an agreement which would return them to a 10% commissioning business model not seen in decades. And that was the thing they had to do. So the agreement that was done where all the major agencies had to comply. They had to go ahead and surrender, let us submit, that back in April 2019, in this program we talked about it, that there were agents that would refuse to sign the Guild's code of conduct. modified versions which would phase out packaging fees by 2022 and limit the agency's ownership interest in affiliated production companies to just 20%. And they got everybody, including WME, which is the last holdout, to sign the agreement. And the Guild finally got all that done. Lawsuits were taken care of, and the Writers Guild at that time said that packaging, which agencies bring together many of the creative elements of a show, and agency affiliations with related production and distribution companies, created conflict of interest for the agencies. Well, CAA, Michael Ovitz, he's one of the guys that created that concept, but people got caught up into it, and for some, it worked really well. For some of the others, on the lower end of the totem pole, they were hurt by it. The Guild claimed that packaging fees paid by the studios were a violation of state and federal labor law because they amounted to illegal kickbacks from an employer to an employee representative. And Writers Guild argued that agency affiliations with corporately related production companies made the agencies and affect both their clients, representatives, and employers. So relations would be normalized. That was 2021. But now we're at the point where another deal came in 2019 to take care of the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers. Because in 2020, there was a deal of trying to get that all squared away. And that was another issue to go into play. So if we go back to that moment, if we go back to that time, back in 2019, the Writers Guild was talking about that the studios were creating a gig economy, like an Uber, right? Turning writing into an entirely freelance profession. So they were trying to make their moves to try to cut down. And the Writers Guild at the time slammed the major employers for not responding to fundamental shifts in the entertainment economy. They were creating a gig economy inside a union workforce, and their immovable stance in the negotiation has betrayed a commitment to further devaluing the profession of writing. Well, then after that, everything got themselves squared away. Now, I didn't get a chance to go and look back what the negotiations were at that time, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Now, at the time in 2020, streaming was a major topic. And other Hollywood guilds were looking to tackle the advent of multiple new streaming services in 2020. Well, now we've had them, right? And then we've also had all the issues where you had multiple mergers, studios laying off, having significant cost cuts in 2020 because of the pandemic. And now inflation doing the same thing again. And so we had all that to go along with at that time. And so the issue was that the studio's current stance on streaming could clash against the years-long push within the Writers Guild membership at that time to demand fair residual payment structures that reflect the widespread pivot from traditional TV to streaming. Well, now they need more because it's still becoming more of a gig economy, and for writers, it's becoming much more difficult, and that was the problem here. Now streaming is ultimately the majority right now. Peak season is all about the amount of programming that's being done by streamers. So let's go into what's happening now, current day. I wanted to give you the history lesson to get now to current day and where everything is at this moment. So the Writers Guild, they were already saying after the strike started that the Guild was looking for new contract would increase pay and benefits by $429 million over 3 years. The studio is only offering $86 million. So the Guild wants pay and benefits 5 times more. That's a lot. That's a big numbers to go in between. Now, the Writers Guild is also giving up a high number. The negotiation, you go high, you go low. This is like Scarface. I know how this goes, man. I go high, you'll go low. I know, man. All right. Well, anyway, Deadline.com talked with one of the presidents of WGA West and others that the company stonewalled the Guild from the very beginning on negotiations on a constellation of proposals. And the point that was being made by the Writers Guild that 98% of their membership is demanding the fight for something different, not just the usual negotiation we've been having, and that the members are feeling an existential threat. They need to take this seriously. and it's just fell on deaf ears. And they don't, and the AMPTP, they're saying they don't hear us when we're telling them about the plight of writers and how much has gone wrong. They need to fix it. And they just didn't seem to listen. And the biggest problem they had in negotiation with companies was they would not engage on a number of issues that affect the ability of a writer to maintain a career. So we're far apart, David Goodman says, and that the companies would not engage with us on these topics. So that in that sense, we're far apart. Yeah, the money's a big thing. And you know what? If it was up to the movie studios, now that I've been 5 years on this, because I wasn't well rounded like I am now on the labor unions and how this works out. The bottom line is, in a normal negotiation, the money would be the extra. And of course, negotiations would cause an increase in fees. But the thing is that it can't just be an increase in fees anymore. The Writers Guild, they know they have to make a permanent stance to make sure they're going to get paid a living wage for themselves. Now, they wouldn't say what the issues would be discussed, but the Guild says that there's minimum staffing, the establishment of viewer-based streaming residuals, the use of artificial intelligence, full pension, and health contributions for writing teams. Those were some of the issues that were unwilling, the AMPTP did not want to discuss. They weren't going to worry about, the amount of people working, so limited staff on all this stuff, right? Limited resources. And the primary sticking points the association contends is that it's mandatory staffing, duration of employment, Guild proposals that would require a company to staff a show with a certain number of writers for a specified period of time, whether needed or not. Right. Overcompensating. And I get where the movie studios are coming from. Yeah, they want to keep it as efficient as possible, like the big corporations that they are. The association also says they're willing to engage in discussions, but the Guild leader said that what they're doing is disingenuous. So they're both throwing mud, as I said. They're just lashing back at each other. So they're also saying that the association, the AMPTP, says if you drop everything you want to talk about, we'll talk to you about the things we want to talk about, which is the money. I guarantee you it's the money. They don't want to give, they don't want to, they might go do an increase of what, 200 million? Maybe 250? But when you're that far apart, just on the money alone, that's not going to change. Not going to make a difference. There's a lot of money that's going to be hit on these studios at a time when they're already making layoffs and cuts, and they're merging and collaborating, and they're losing their ass on streaming. Because the traditional model of exhibition for movies, of doing television on traditional network or cable, failing. I mean, I'll give benefit of the doubt to a point. The studios are hurting right now because they don't have that positive, stable revenue stream that they had before. They're splitting it over multi-platforms. That's that word that radio likes to use now, multi-platform for audio, right? But that's where they are. They're at a point where they're in transition. And the studios, they don't have a set plan on how to make money off what they're doing. This is why the streaming services are also struggling, because they're going to have to start adding ad tier support for, having subscriptions for ad tiers and raising rates and realizing that some people do not want to have all these services. These are all problems. So people realize, oh, look at all this money we have to pay over cable. They don't want to go back to cable. They're not going backwards. But they're also not going to go forwards and say, oh, well, we don't need to have Netflix, Disney, Hulu, Paramount Plus, and Max all in one time. That's $100. Who wants to pay that? People already got tired of paying that anyway. And then also some of the people that don't want to pay for movies, they don't want to pay that much money. When you gave so much shit on the internet for free or at such a low price and so much content for somebody to have, you've dumbed down the audience. You took down the quality of the programming, of the content. You allowed so much out there. You forgot about quality. You just said, let's just put as much content as we can out there to get as many bucks as we can get for these people. That's what happened. And now they're struggling. So be it. This is their bed. They're lying in it. And all these companies, they're trying to figure out. And listen, this is all scripted stuff for the most part, right? We're not talking about the live sports. But all these streamers, they can't rely on intellectual property or live sports or legacy content. they have to put new content out there on a regular basis. They rely on these studios, these workers, these writers to make it all this new content possible, to make these streamers profitable. Because these companies are spending billions upon billions of dollars of content, which I said, watch out. Netflix, watch out what you're doing. You're putting $20 billion worth of content a year. And are you going to make your money back? Because they're living off of valuations. Are they making enough money to make a profit? Because that was the other problem they had. What happens when they get a drop in subscribers? Then remember you have the stock dropping and all those other companies, the media companies are all hitting right now in the stocks. Their value has gone down. They've had to lay off. They've been losing and they have to keep the stockholders happy. And now you got the strike, which is making things worse. Nobody's thinking about this. So here's what one of the people from the WGA who is pretty vocal about this, that I think makes a good point. So the negotiating committee co-chairs, Chris Kaiser, was very vocal. And this is what he says. He already talked about if you want to drop everything else, we'll talk about the things we want to talk about. This is what Kaiser said about minimum staffing. Yeah, they say that's one of the things they're not going to do. And I know they highlighted it because they think it's to their advantage. But the truth is, minimum staffing is only one proposal that's part of a constellation of proposals that is all in the areas that go to the question. Can writers have a stable, steady income across a year and across a career? Right. Year-round income. That's like anybody else that works. You want to have year-round income. Makes sense. It's logical. Everybody can relate to that. We're looking at a world in which they're slowly eliminating the number of weeks we work, the number of writers who work those weeks, and not paying writers for the value they create. We can't let that happen. They won't talk to us about artificial intelligence. They won't talk to us about guaranteed weeks of work for comedy variety writers. They won't talk to us about the fact that the effect of pre-green light mini rooms mean that writers work for very few weeks and then to get rid of most writers for the rest of the television show. Remember that after the last negotiations. You got to realize that these corporations, these big media conglomerates, they're sneaky bastards, okay? And listen, I don't make any money off of any of these people. But I'm one of the few shows that talk about media here that is not behooving to any big major corporate entity. So I'm not getting a job from them. But I'll talk about them because they need to be constructively criticized. This is where the writers, this is where their fight is coming in now. If you need to understand why the strike's happening, these are the decisions right here that the writers are able to work year round and also not get cut out of making more money or moving up. That right there. Pre-green light mini rooms. So there's only a select amount of writers that are kind of favorited to whichever studio that's working with them. And the other writers, they get rid of for the most of the rest of the television show. Yeah. They won't talk about writers who work into production because writing happens all the way through the process. They're entirely closed off about it. And they're closed off about it because it is their intention to slowly eliminate our weekly employment and make it like a limited kind of freelance workforce, gig economy. And we told them from the very beginning that's not going to happen in this negotiation. Well, you know why that has to be the case? The Writers Guild has to fight this now because you know what? If the Writers Guild cannot assure full employment, year-round employment, benefits, and access, I mean, the Writers Guild becomes useless. It becomes, why are these writers paying the fees? Why are they paying their dues for if the Writers Guild doesn't come in here and stop this? That's the problem. Which is exactly, the Writers Guild for themselves, they need for this for them to survive. Remember, they just survived everything with the franchise and the packaging from the Association of Talent Agents. They fought that war, and they succeeded. Succeeded beyond what I thought they were going to do. Now, we're at this point, and they need to make sure that these studios are not going to plagiarize by using AI and using robots to write their scripts. You need a human component. You need human interaction and human understanding to write some of these scripts, okay? Especially the scripted programming, especially good dramas. Then, you need to worry about the fact that if they're shutting out the writers and making a limited amount of writers be the ones that are in the room doing the TV show, and the other ones get shut out. That is a new practice, and they need to nip that in the bud quickly. And then on top of that, if these writers cannot work consistently throughout the year and make a career out of it, less writers were coming in, less members paying their dues, and the effectiveness of the Writers Guild is neutered. They become ineffective if they don't win this fight. So they're going to fight this for as long as they possibly can. That's what's going to happen. Can this go 100 days like 2007? Most likely. I think we'll at least get that, but I think this fight is so hard right now, they have no choice but to go farther. Now, let's go into more. So David Goodman talks about the studio response. And David Goodman, who's one of the negotiators on this, he says that the Paramount head, Bob Bakish, sounds scared. So he talked to Deadline and says that longevity of writers. Obviously, they want to turn this into a gig economy, a gig job. All the proposals from AI to the day rate for comedy variety writers to the dismissal of all the concerns we raised about free work for screenwriters are signaling they have a plan to devalue writers so that less writers are hired, more pressures placed on those individuals that they do hire. Right. And the studios think this is a chance they can go ahead and now no longer render writers useful or as necessary as before. If they can take it to where they can have less writers handling a project, they don't care how many people it takes to make it happen. You know, they probably don't believe in the writers' rooms need to be that big to make a show. Okay. All right. Now, Bob Bakish, is the Paramount CEO, did discuss the issue after their financial report, and that the writers are, quote, essential in creating content and hope that they can come to a resolution, And Goodman would say that he sounds scared. I mean, honestly, I see it as like, oh, he's scared. All we care about is making a good deal for our members, and we know the companies that we're negotiating with can afford it. But they don't want to afford it right now when they're hurting. And they don't want to afford it anyway. They just don't want to pay it. You know, they're being very frugal for themselves. They'd rather, like a company, like a big corporation does, they want to make as much money as possible and keep the overhead as low as possible. And the writers are standing in the way of that. And with that said, the writers also made themselves physically known, because the strike itself actually went ahead and started affecting production. So let's go and talk about that. The Writers Guild closed down Wall Street drama Billions for several hours on Thursday. Now the shuttering, and by the way, there are still production that can still go on because there were scripts that are already written for shows that are already being produced. Okay? So it's not like there's new stuff being written, but there are still things going on that could be allowed. All right? So here's what we got. Thursday morning in New York City, there was a tow truck hauling a prop Jeep to the set, pulled to the parking lot near the Brooklyn waterfront, and there were picket signs and WGA members. And also Teamsters would show solidarity with another group of picketers and turned their trucks around outside where American Horror Story's latest season is filming. So right there, in the 4-hour shutdown of Billions, cast and crews decided not to cross the picket lines. And representatives for Paramount could not be reached by Deadline.com to comment on the temporary shutdown. And the fact that the cast and crew decided not to cross the picket line was respected by the production and Showtime company, parent company Paramount Global, and there will be no repercussions. Sources connected to Billions tell them. And filming would later resume, but they were making a statement, right? Even if it was just something short, that's what was happening. Now, as a matter of fact, this is the final season of the series, by the way, that's going on right now. And there were no writers that were on the set as this was going on. But the thing was that was really curious to the Writers Guild was that they were running a production without writers on set. And then there was confusion around American Horror Story. They were filming a few miles away at Silvercup Studios away from Surrett. And the rumor spread that production had been shut down. Filming did not stop. Sources told Deadline. Teamsters did refuse to cross the picket line. And that was confirmed. And from a crew member on American Horror Story, they said they were waiting for the union rep to arrive before they would leave for the day. Crew member also asserted the actors on the show are entering through a studio back entrance, so they didn't have to cross the picket line to set up at the main entrance. And there were some skirmishes, they said, some small ones in Brooklyn, handfuls of picketers briefly surrounding and blocking production workers as they wheeled plastic bins full of pieces of furniture across a cobbled street. So there was a little bit of that, things were going on. People were trying to do their jobs, even though that this is going on. Okay. Picketing is still scheduled to continue tomorrow in Los Angeles, New York, and other cities. But no picketing is expected to be scheduled this weekend. But, hey, Writers Guild's being aggressive right now. They're trying to make themselves known. Now, let's talk about the association. Let's get their response on this as well. And they tried to say they were making a generous offer back to them. So let's talk about that. The Alliance, I keep seeing association, Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. They did say that they did provide answers to the talking points about failed negotiations. So here's what they said as a statement. Our companies are committed to finding workable solutions. Moving along. They said they presented a comprehensive package of proposals to the Guild that included generous increases in compensation for writers as well as improvements in streaming residuals. So yeah, the money part. Of course they're going to give more money. They have no choice to do that. And they said at the time they're prepared to improve that offer. But it's just the money. But is unwilling to do so because of the magnitude of other proposals still on the table that the Guild continues to insist upon. Right. The primary sticking points, mandatory staffing, duration of employment. That's what it is. Yeah, studios only want to pay the money. That's all they want to pay. So if they got to double their money from $86 million or $86 billion, whatever it is, that's what they have to do to move forward. That's what they're going to do. That's all they want to do. But it's all about timing. All about timing. Now, the positions on the key issues, the stuff that's not the money related. The Alliance, let me correct myself, the Alliance says this. The proposals that on mandatory staffing and guarantees of employment, that they would require studios to staff a show within a certain number of writers who will be hired for a specific period of time that may not align with the creative process. If writing needs to be done, writers are hired, but these proposals require the employment of writers, whether they're in the creative process or not. And the Writers Guild argued it's necessary to preserve the writer's room. It is in reality a hiring quota that is incompatible with the creative nature of our industry. We don't agree with applying a one-size-fits-all solution to shows that are unique and different in their approach to creative staffing. And some writers are the sole voice of a show, and others only work with a small team. Overall numbers. So the most recent offer of minimum wage increases up to $41 million per year. And based on information from pension and health plans, the company's offer on minimum wages is closer to $97 million a year. And it doesn't account the outsized wage increases and residual increases the companies have offered. Now, as for wages across the board for the writers, the first year general wage increase is the highest first year increase offered to the Writers Guild in more than 25 years. So they're saying we're giving so much more because of the streaming. Here you go. And the companies have offered to create an entirely new category of rates that will establish a new and higher floor for mid-level writers' compensation. Now, the Writers Guild negotiated a 46% increase in residuals, streaming, in 2020 to take effect in 2022. And writers have only started to see those increases in paychecks. So they're saying they haven't enough time for the new money in streaming to come into their paychecks, right? So under the current formula for a 1-hour series produced on Netflix or Amazon Prime, a writer receives $72,000 residuals for one episode over 3 years. Over 5 years, it comes up to $100,000, and then $114,000 over 7 years. The company's most recent offer further improves on this. So that's the number. Here's what we're getting for the writers, okay? For a 1-hour series for Netflix or Amazon Prime, yeah, over that time. But that's for the full run of all the writing that he did and getting the residuals off of that. Mm-hmm. The proposal right now on foreign streaming residuals represents a 200% increase over current rates and treats foreign subscribers as the same as domestic subscribers. Right. They want the money from overseas, from those people that are subscribing to the streaming services. They want the money coming from them to be a lot more. I get it. Subscription fees vary from country to country, and in many countries, the fee is less than the U.S. But they recognize the importance of foreign streaming. They offer to increase the residual. The companies have, under the alliance. In regards to the gig economy, the Writers Guild claims that companies are treating television writers' jobs as if they're part of a gig economy. But employment as a writer has almost nothing in common to do with standard gigs. For one, most television writers are employed on a weekly or episodic basis, with a guarantee of a specified number of episodes or weeks. It's not uncommon for writers to be guaranteed all episodes produced. And writing jobs come with fringe benefits that are far superior to what any full-time employees receive for an entire working year. Employer-paid health care, contributions to a pension, eligibility for a paid parental leave program. Yeah, so corporate. And for the contractual jobs, okay, because they're getting under contract. That's what they're trying to say. That they're basically like independent contractors. But they have to be contracted based on what the Writers Guild makes them do. And what they're getting right now is fringe benefits like a corporation, like they're full-time employees, which is the part of what anything goes on, right? It's the part of, like any corporation. Yeah, you're not going to get paid well, but the benefits are good. And that's what's happening here. Look, to get employer-paid health care, these days, $400, $600, $800 a month, in some cases for premiums. Contributions to a pension plan, but that's not money that's going into them right now. But some of these people are probably not worried about retirement. And they're not worried about a pension plan. And then parental paid leave. Like, those are great things to have. They should be required if you're contracted. But at the moment, that's a nice way to put it. But for the writers, they might be able to get all those perks, but that also doesn't help their regular income, a steady flow of income for all of them. And that's the part they have, which is why they're talking about longer employment. And the median number of weeks for employment for a writer engaged in a streaming series is 20 and 24 weeks. And a staff writer earns between $91,000 and $109,000 when paid at the minimum scale. And writers and producers, which are the largest category of TV writers, they make $150,000 and $180,000 when paid at scale for the period of time. But remember, you're living in Hollywood, living in New York, and you know what? $150,000, $180,000 doesn't cut it. That's not a lot of money in those states, especially when it comes up for rent, when it comes to mortgages, when it comes to cost of living, way more than that kind of money allows. So if you're talking about somebody that's new into the business, new writers, you're going to make about $100,000 on average. Is that enough to live off of in New York City? You're living in a hovel, in a 30 by 30 foot like brothel. There's gonna be a hostel. Excuse me, oh boy, hostel. You're gonna live in like a room, not even a room with no like kitchen that you're gonna be like 2 steps away from. Your bathroom's gonna be like barely anything. Like imagine any place anybody wants to go and live in a place there in the having working writers' rooms and working only 20 to 24 weeks a year, right? You're talking about, okay, yeah, for the money that they're making, for working almost 6 months, yeah, that's not bad. That's actually pretty good. But if these writers at the minimum were making $200,000 a year, and these writer producers were making $300,000 to $300,000 or $400,000 a year, then I can justify what the Alliance of Motion Picture TV Producers are saying, what these big production studios these movie studios are talking about, these TV studios. I can almost justify it, but that's not that much. Writers earn more than $28,000 for a half-hour script more than $41,000 for a 1-hour script. Right? So that's what they're saying. It's not enough. It's not a lot of money, is actually, when I really think about it. Because where they have to stay. A writer needs a... Now, here's the benefits they're talking about now. The benefit plans are the best in the industry, they say. Pension. Writer needs to earn $5,000 in a calendar year to qualify. That's pretty good. Health benefits. They need to earn $42,000 over the course of 4 calendar quarters to qualify for the health insurance. The Writers Guild. Free with no participant premium. That's pretty good. A staff writer who works 8 weeks at the current rate or works 5 weeks at the current weekly rate would get 1 year free health coverage and the best health plan of the industry, like the Affordable Care Act. You're going to get the gold plan. Okay. And then parental paid leave is that, maternity leave, whatever kind of sickness, whatever it might be, there's that part. Now, artificial intelligence. Here's what they're saying about that. So, we value the work of creatives. AI raises hard, important, creative, and legal questions for everyone, but writers want to use this technology as part of the creative process without changing how credits are determined, which is complicated given AI material can't be copyrighted. But AI and copyright, that needs to be a discussion that's actually talked about. But we haven't gotten there yet. Plagiarism is going to be rampant because of this. So now, the current agreement defines a writer to exclude any corporate or impersonal purveyor of literary material. So only a person can be considered a writer and enjoy the terms and conditions of the basic agreement, and AI-generated material will not be eligible for writing credit. So right now, they're already trying to say that AI is not getting rewarded. Anybody using AI will not be rewarded for that writing credit. They're not going to make the money off of it. And the script fees for staff writers we're talking about now is that there's already an agreement tentatively to pay staff writers script fees on top of their weekly compensation. And that was what the Writers Guild's wanted for decades. So a staff writer who writes an episode of a 1-hour series will be paid an extra $42,000 or 8 weeks to pay rate. And that would also get them the benefits of health and parental paid leave. That's what they're trying to say. Now, they also talk about development rooms, the mini rooms, the greenlit mini rooms, the pre-greenlit mini rooms. So the companies agreed to introduce an entirely new payment structure for writers employed before a firm commitment has been made to produce a series, substantially increasing minimum rates for those working in development rooms. In addition, the companies agreed to pay writers employed before a firm commitment has been made to produce a series, 15% premium for script fees and 50% for a pilot script for a high budgeted video on demand series, streaming video on demand. So that's the two sides. And when I read all that, the writers, they're not worried about just the money. That's what's being made the point. Is that they think that if they just throw more money onto these studios, they think it's going to change anything. If they're not doing anything seriously about trying to curb artificial intelligence from infiltrating their industry, they need to handle that too. And the fact that the employers, listen, it is a bit of a gig economy. They're at the point of being contractual, but like really, if you're only making that all together for 20 to 24 weeks, if I'm reading that right, okay, they're not getting paid per script at that point. Now, if I'm right, if they're working on a series, the scripts they're going to get paid. If they're writing up a script, a half-hour script or a 1-hour script, okay, they're going to make the higher end because they're going to write the whole shows. They're going to be writing full series that are going to make more money. But when they're collaborating on writing, that's when they're going to get a staff writer, okay, when they're collaborating on writing for a particular story arcs or whatever they're going to be doing, all the middle part of getting a show up to take from the plot or take what that storyline is going to be and fill it in, that's what those staff writers are going to make. They're not making enough. And they're also the ones that are getting shut out of those pre-greenlit writers' rooms. Does that make sense? Because the main writers, these writer-producers are talking about, they rely on the other people to come in and help them. Because if these producers had to write it on their own and get these shows ready, I mean, that's another thing they got to do themselves. That's a lot of work. But they're getting to work and collaborate and have other input coming in from other writers to be able to write good scripts. Because if not, what are you going to do? That's a lot of work to put on these writers, these writer producers who might be making more money. Sure, they're making more money, but you're taking away their resources, their staff. I think they're not wrong about that. And there's a lot of things that were being discussed about with these streaming projects that they're not necessarily set to a schedule, are they? Like, I mean, put it like this. If one particular show, if they're doing 20 to 24 weeks on a streaming series, so like I say if they're working double time on a show that might be 10 or 12 episodes, anything could happen where those shows are not set on set schedules, right? Like, sometimes you don't see these shows particularly come back at the same time every year. They're not set to like a schedule and say, okay, they're coming back like a fall season just like anybody else. No, they're not getting the network schedule where it used to be back in the day. At one point it was 22, 24, 30, 36. You know, you'd have all those shows. And so like some writers back in the day, 36 weeks for a regular show, 16 weeks for a summer show. And you know what? They'd figure it out. And that would be a lot of work for all those people to go and work, and they would be making their money off of it. The residuals as well would work out better. But now, with all these shows the way they are, these writers are expected to go and have 2 different shows they can work on or more regularly to keep themselves fed. And that kind of money is not enough. So the Writers Guild, they're going to go big time on trying to make more money, which is what they're doing right now, which you're asking for what? 4 or 5 times the amount. That makes sense to me. And I want to do the rest of this. So yeah, why not do this? Why not go for this route? Okay. So let's go into the part now. Late night shows are already affected. Jimmy Kimmel Live, The Late Show, Tonight Show, Daily Show. And now Saturday Night Live will also be affected by this as well. And now let's go into this. The pilots, the upfront season's already being affected. So there's going to be a little bit of push around about what shows are going to be pushed out there because the writer strike's causing it. So as we knew from 2007, the fall season of shows or the spring season of shows, a lot of shows did not start up on time in 2007. We're back to that again. So there's 14 policies of law across 3 networks. ABC, NBC, and CBS have this year. And so we don't know what's going to happen for the upfront week of May 15th. Everyone is distracted, and Intel's being very hard and difficult. So the upfront presentations are all stuck in a spot. But right now, the writer's strike is starting to affect pickup decisions as the networks are faced with the possibility no newly ordered or new scripted series could go into production for months if the impasse between the Writers Guild and studios does not get resolved quickly. And even Deadline says it doesn't appear unlikely. It appears unlikely. So there's that. There's a lot of shows and all those. So I'm not even going to get into them, but they're all being affected. So this is going to be a long run. And all I can do in this program is continue to go ahead and just work through and let it all happen. You know? That's movies and television. So we're going to see that happen. Good thing is we got a lot of movies to watch. And there's still a lot of programming still out there that can still be pushed out and shown on streaming services. The networks, their old antiquated system, is going to hurt for a while. And that's only going to hurt them more and more because they're not going to have the audience. They're going to have to run reruns. What are they going to do next? If it were me, I don't even worry about the new seasons of shows. You know what? Start taking from your library, CBS, NBC, ABC. You need to start running some old programming to try to get people back. You might as well do that and start learning that you're going to have to go that route in order to get people to watch. At least the older audience to engage with it. For the ones that will not pay for streaming services or have not yet given up their cable. Just saying. All right, I got a few more stories I want to bring into, and I might have to hold some stuff over because I went and spent a lot of time on this because it needed the time for it. Okay, AI and music industry. We've talked about this already, but Variety put a big story out about this and discussed it. So there's a lot of fakes out there that are starting to get picked up and caught on the streamers for music. So now, we heard about ChatGPT back in October last year. And during Grammy week in February, it started getting talked about. And then we started seeing some things that were going out there that were getting people upset. David Guetta channeling Eminem on a song through artificial intelligence. And then there was Heart on My Sleeve, a song with AI-generated vocals by a fake Drake and a fake Weeknd that got millions of streams before being removed by streaming services. Electronic artist Grimes not only promised a 50-50 split with anyone who used her AI voice in a song, she launched a software to help them do it. Then we had the Human Artistry campaign. We talked about that here. That got created to try to stop this, for the real human component of music to stay intact. And so this is an issue that's going on. One person in the story says that to say AI is a devil would be naive. And there's regular grief that this person says they're getting from associates who call him a crybaby or call him or her a crybaby for wanting royalties for streaming to be higher. And it's fun to characterize creative people wanting to protect their livelihoods as Luddites or crybabies, but our property rights exist. Our rights to publicity exist, and copyright is still significant. There's a whole bunch of stories about that, but that's one of the things that continues to be an issue. But it's a long story they did. Now, one of the answers is being said by one of the people in this article says that YouTube already does fingerprinting on music, so if it's played in the background, the artist can get paid. But it has to be an exact copy of a commercially published version. AI can get over that hurdle. It can see things, and even if it's an interpolation or someone just performing the music. As performing rights groups collect on radio, airplay, and other uses, AI can be deployed to detect and collect on instances where a recording breaches copyright. So if AI listens to music and any derivative content with an algorithm to identify where the music has originated, creates a mechanism to collect revenue generated by that content with the ability to then pay the content creators, that would be a huge benefit to artists. So if the AI still goes out there and these artists are still hearing their voices on there, if they're still getting paid on it, it doesn't matter, right? And then they talk about here in the story, do we need a jury to decide copyright cases? Interesting. It's like the one they had today where Ed Sheeran actually just won a case, copyright lawsuit, because the people that produced the Marvin Gaye song "Let's Get It On" there was some kind of a sampling or interpolation kind of feel that Ed Sheeran did licensing with a song "Thinking Out Loud." They tried to say there was a similar part, but the court didn't see it that way. Good. Now, besides that story, there is TikTok trying to go and work on an AI music app that significantly lowers the music creation barrier. This will be a disruptor, but AI is disrupting music just like anything else. We talked about this many times on the program, and we should continue to talk about that because that is an issue across the board. As a matter of fact, I did a story about that. And, back in March, I talked about radio removing real talent for AI inferiority. Like, we already have that part to deal with. And people need to be aware of it. So anyway, TikTok, they're trying to create, they're getting a product manager in Los Angeles to join a team working on an AI-powered tool that provides intelligent music creation and audio editing capabilities. And it's to significantly lower the music creation barrier and inspire musical creativity and expression, further enriching the music content. It's in a job ad that ByteDance has to hire a new product manager in Los Angeles. And there are a bunch of those groups that are out there trying to go and create machine learning-driven music making apps. So this is something to keep an eye on if this is happening. But again, the job ad comes out there. That's going to raise the antenna of some people looking at this right now. That's the fact of the matter. I want to take from one story that's in here that says about how the music industry right now, they've controlled what the consumer listens to for too long. So they talked to an entrepreneur that's trying to go ahead and change that and disrupt themselves. And they talked to Emma Banks, who's the director behind the label 45 FRTYFVE, an artist growth company. And they're behind the Christmas singles of the group Lad Baby, which does comedy YouTube videos. And they've been able to hit 5 years in a row the Christmas #1 song on the UK official chart. So that's what's been going on there. And this is what's being said in the story. The industry has control where the consumer listens for way too long. They would pay a radio plugger, and the radio teams would dictate what was played. Press teams would dictate what PR what gets out there. Now, TikTok, algorithms, and tools like Spotify's Discovery Mode have put the consumer in control. And major labels hate Discovery Mode because they've lost control of what the consumers goes in their hands. And they talked to someone else named Lucian Grange, talking about how consumers are often guided by algorithms to generic music that lacks meaningful artist context. But that is not, and that's not a level playing field. And actually, the consumer is discovering music they love for the first time without any level of bias. So that's the problem they have there. And these are the kind of things we're getting right now about the kind of music we're getting out there that we're finally learning about that the radio doesn't control. And there's nothing wrong with that, I think. It's actually a pretty credible point. So there's much more I got. I'm not going to have time for. I'm going to keep this within an hour. But let me tell you, there's a lot more we could talk about. They talked about, as there was a story I wanted to get into where they talk about which TV and streaming companies are most vulnerable right now in the writer's strike, which I'll bring that up real quick because I won't have something to say about later. And they talked about with A&E networks, when it comes to their stuff, they're mostly on unscripted content right now, so they won't script any impact from a writer's walkout. Amazon has a medium strike impact. AMC Networks has medium. Apple is a high strike impact because they're heavily on scripted content, and they will get a big strike on it. Same thing for Disney. A lot of their programming is going to have an effect on that. Same thing for Fox. Same thing for, actually, medium for Lionsgate, medium for NBC Universal. Netflix has a medium impact because their content also is produced globally. So they can go ahead and ride out a storm and just have foreign content fill up on their coffers for as much as they want. Paramount will be affected highly. So, remember this. Warner Brothers Discovery, they don't do scripted output right now because it counts for 7% of total content. And half of that's from HBO. So when Warner Brothers Discovery, they cut themselves off all that scripted content. David Zaslav started, making all the changes that he did. Yep. Because they're going to avoid things like this. And Warner Brothers Discovery is going to skate to this okay. Maybe not so much for their movies and all, but it's a different story. So there you go. The Writers Guild's going to have to do their thing. Of course, I hope this doesn't go long. I hope that the Alliance will come to their senses and realize they're going to get sweated out. They're going to have to give up more. And money's not going to be enough this time. I'm pretty sure of that. So keep that all in mind. There's some radio stuff I have in here too. No, I'll bring up real quick. So streaming's losing now listening time to podcasts. That's a story that YouTube put out. Well, there's a story that came out and talked about that. I'll bring it up real quick. iHeartMedia put out this study. 500 podcast listeners between 12 and 54. Americans are making more time for podcasts, mostly by reducing time with streaming video, music, and social media. Well, they're probably not wrong about that. At least I know for me, I'm like that. But they also don't talk about it's not just podcasting, it's also audiobooks on my end. Or music. Now, on top of that, there's much more going on here. The AI thing we talked about with Drew Carey a week ago or 2 weeks ago, where he tried to do an experiment where he was doing AI-related content and the audience hated it. Well, station went try to go AI for a day. Radio Television Suisse Couleur 3. Okay, a station in Switzerland. They took 13 hours of the broadcast day and ran AI-generated shows from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on April 27th. Algorithm-driven music programs hosted by the clones of 5 hosts reading scripts from ChatGPT and other AI text generators. The only non-AI content were news bulletins. Every 20 minutes during the programming, listeners were reminded that the shows were AI-generated. One reminder, our voice clones and AI are here to unsettle, surprise, and shake you. And for that matter, this text was also written by a robot. Listeners were shared feedback on social media, and ZD.net RTS did also an on-air experiment with the intent of determining AI's strengths and weaknesses, but agree with those listener sentiments. It's not easy distinguishing between a human and robot speaking. However, the experiment shows us that creativity, surprise, and humor remain human characteristics. This reassures us, even though we had no doubt about it from the beginning of the project. This shows us the way forward, working on added value and originality in our content. Will AI teach radio to start getting more personality-driven? No. You know what will change it? When radio gets imploded because the private equity companies and a lot of varying factors are going to come into play where radio is going to have to pay more. Eventually, that deal with the royalties down the line, they're going to have to deal with that too. So radio is going to have their own impasse, just like the movie studios right now. And money's not going to be enough. And the movie studios, they're going to survive all this stuff. But the radio stations, they're not. They're going to probably have to unload stations, and they'll become independent. And once again, be in the hands of real broadcasters that want to do the right thing and serve the public. Because the airways are owned by the public. Right? We're taxpayers. The airways should be serving us. Maybe they'll do that someday. That's the show for tonight. Thanks for listening in. Finding as you'll always do, broadcasterspodcast.com is where you find all the content of the program. And also just keep in mind, too, that all my programming, all the show descriptions you can find on the website. You can find the show wherever you find podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio. It's all there. And Google Podcasts. You can find all the programming of the King of Podcasts Radio Network, including how to go and work with me in production services if you want. KingofPodcasts.com. KingofPodcasts.com. And most importantly, you can find me on all social media. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at King of Podcasts. Until next week, remember the content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.